Tormented Souls is exactly the type of horror game that I would enjoy. It's a fixed camera angle, tank-controlled horror game that focuses on inventory management, puzzle solving, and navigating an ever-expanding area. This game is a love letter to all of my favorite classic horror games like Silent Hill, Dino Crisis, and of course my favorite series, Resident Evil. And seeing that it's Spooktober, I thought it was a perfect time for me to cover it. So without wasting any more time, let's talk about Tormented Souls. Tormented Souls starts with our main character, Caroline Walker, receiving a mysterious letter from a mysterious person. Upon opening it, she is greeted with a picture of two girls, and looking at it causes her pain. Curious about what the letter meant, she travels to the Wildberg Hospital to find some answers, only to be knocked out by someone. She wakes up in a bathtub and finds out that she's missing an eye. Terrified, it's now up to not only escape the hospital but to find out what happened to the twins in the photo. The gameplay of Tormented Souls is very similar to the likes of classic Resident Evil titles, and as such it has all the basics such as the fixed camera angles, the tank controls, and the labyrinthian design that I love oh so much. It's really refreshing to see this classic style of horror recreated so perfectly in modern times, amongst all the copious amounts of first-person horror games. But let me not get too ahead of myself. There are actually two control styles in this game if you're playing on a controller at least. The D-pad, which has a more traditional tank control setup where the buttons are always from the perspective of your character. So no matter what way the angle is showing, up on the D-pad is always forward and down on the D-pad is always backwards. This is my preferred way to play, and it's not just because of nostalgia. Tank controls are actually made with the fixed camera angles in mind, and as such, it eliminates the problem that is found in the secondary control type, which is controlled via the analog stick. This control setup is more modern, so the controls are from the perspective of the camera, but in a game where the camera often changes on a dime, the controls can become quite clunky. This is because the way it works is that as long as you continue to hold down the button in between camera cuts, the controls stay the same as the previous cut, but once you let go of the stick you have to readjust to the new angle, right? So often during camera changes you have to readjust the analog stick, which makes your character jitter about in a weird way. I'll talk a bit more about this exact issue in one of my first videos, so if you want a bit more in-depth explanation then you should watch that video. The link will be in the description below. The atmosphere in this game is actually pretty good. Maybe not as good as something like Silent Hill or Dead Space, but for what it is, it's great. I think what makes the atmosphere in this game so good are the camera angles and the music. I've always championed the art of fixed camera angles and how they can really add to the atmosphere and mood of any given game, and this game is no exception. In fact, I think this game has some of the best shots out of any horror game I've ever played. The angles are distinct and eye-catching, and they're not only used for style points. Very often the angles are used to build anticipation and tension, similar to the moment in Resident Evil 2 when you first meet the Licker. This game is fully 3D, and as such the camera angles aren't very static. Very often will it pan around and do dramatic zoom-ins. Sometimes, however, the camera angles do obscure areas of progression. The one area that sticks out in my mind the most is this hallway off to the side. I discovered it by complete accident. It was completely obscured by the camera, but thankfully that doesn't happen too often in this game. Just overall, I'm so glad they used fixed camera angles for this game. For anyone that's watching my Dead Space videos, please go watch them, I worked really hard on them, then you would know that sound design and music is one of the most important things to me when it comes to making a tangible atmosphere in a horror game. Well, actually any game really, and thankfully Tormented Souls delivers exceedingly in that regard. Just the title screen alone lets you know that you are in for a treat. Some of the tracks are peaceful yet foreboding, like the main hall theme. While other themes are chaotic and industrial. And of course, no self-respecting horror game will be caught dead without an absolutely amazing save room theme. The music in this game is great, and the sound design is too. My only complaint would be that the audio quality leaves a lot to be desired, but as far as I know, this game was made by a pretty small studio, so that's to be expected. Also, the voice acting can be a little, well...
What? Is this... my room? But this is hundreds of miles away from the mansion. How can this be possible?
I, for one, don't really think the voice acting is a problem, but then again, I played a lot of horror games from the early 2000s and 90s, so I'm used to the voice acting being a little hit or miss. This game has a pretty decent scare factor. While playing, I never found myself getting too relaxed. I was always on the edge of my seat while walking through the dark corridors of the hospital. One thing I greatly appreciated about this game was how there weren't that many jump scares. Sure, there are still a few scattered here and there, but they weren't constantly happening, and usually they would only occur during long bouts of exploration so as to not let the player completely relax. Remember, this is a horror game after all. It has to scare you. The enemy designs can be pretty freaky at times, like these wheelchair dudes. But on the other hand, they can be quite goofy, like the ghost that starts following you around. I always thought the ghost looks like the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man from Ghostbusters. I found that throughout playing this game that the most tense and scariest moments actually happen during exploration and not from the enemy encounters, which isn't a bad thing by any means at all, and it actually really goes to show just how strong the tension and atmosphere is in this game. I also like this moment where you get kinda soft jump scared by this painting that gets illuminated by the flashlight as you walk around this dark ass basement. All around, not the scariest title I've ever played, but it will definitely give you the spooks if you let yourself become immersed in it, like I did. The level design of this game feels very Resident Evil 1, with the hospital being broken up into an east and west wing, with the main hall connecting the two. You traverse through these throughout the game, finding key items to unlock more of the map. It's just as satisfying as ever. I like how this game doesn't hold your hand through the experience. You have to remember everything and keep track of everything you've come across because it's fairly easy to get lost in this game. In fact, I actually did get quite lost a few times in my playthrough, and I love that feeling of roaming around in the dark, not knowing where you're going, only to stumble across something that, hey, this actually might be for progression. It is quintessentially survival horror. Besides just finding key items and exploring the hospital, there are a plethora of puzzles to solve, and these puzzles are great. They are actually pretty hard to be honest. They made me feel like an idiot, but once I solved them, I feel my IQ levels rising. In fact, some of these puzzles stumped me so hard, I had to bust out the good old-fashioned pen and paper to keep track of my progress and what the solutions could be. Here's an example of a puzzle that actually stumped me. So in this puzzle, you have to unlock this cash register, right? And the only hint you get are these two images that correlate to a number. Well, this puzzle, while seemingly complicated on the outside, actually has a fairly simple solution. The numbers only correlate to the amount of lines intersecting the dot. Most of these puzzles are like this at first. They look complicated, but just take a moment to think about it and you realize how easy the solutions are. Another good puzzle is the one with the floppy disk, the weird piano thing in the office, and the operating room puzzles. But I don't want to spoil those, as hopefully this video has encouraged you to buy the game. So overall, I find Tormented Souls to be an exceptional horror game. One of the best I've played in recent memory. It's the perfect tribute to the classic horror games I love, while also adding to and improving what those original games laid down. It's truly a shame that the modern gaming audience doesn't like this style of horror game, as I would love to see this type of game made with a AAA budget. But I digress. I think anyone that enjoys horror games should give this game a try, as it's only $20 and it's well worth the price. Thank you guys for watching, and take care.